Hey there, you guys. Thanks for joining me and welcome to another Holy Shed in mid October. Can you believe that? Where did it all go? Somewhere in my head, I'm still hanging on to summer. Unreal as ever. But autumn, can be pretty good too, can't it? Give us some nice sunny days and crisp blue skies, and I love all that stuff as well. It's a busy month for me and Pat, as you know, October, as we travel around the country talking about my OMG book of prayers, about prayer in general. And, I'm having a whale of a time, meeting lots of lovely people, having some great conversations, listening to a couple of good books in the car. Thank goodness for Audible, I say. And off to Hove to give a talk today, down to the seaside. Can't wait for that. Now, I don't know if you are aware, but yesterday was Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish year, the Day of Atonement. Though in many branches of Judaism, the focus is less on sins, more on, one's goals and accomplishments, setting yearly intentions, a bit of a personal audit, which is a pretty good thing for us all to do. But anyway, one of the prescribed readings for Yom Kippur in Jewish tradition is the book of the prophet Jonah, one of the shortest books in the Bible, just 48 verses spread over 4 chapters. So I thought, hey, since we're following a rough theme in the Holy Shed of how to read the Bible and still be a Christian, or maybe how to give the Bible a second chance, or just how to make sense of troublesome or weird texts and stories, I thought we'd pause for thought, as it were, to consider this weird story. And weird it certainly is, but worth a second glance. I guess for many of us, Jonah basically sticks in our memory from Sunday school days. That, slightly strange but fun story about a man being swallowed by a whale. And once I get over the idea of reading it that way, as a sort of literal account of something that happened, it became one of my favourite biblical books, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But first, a quick overview to remind ourselves of the story. At the beginning of the book, Jonah is told by God, he's a prophet, and he's told by God to go to the city of Nineveh to proclaim judgment on the Ninevites for their great wickedness. We don't know what their great wickedness was. We do know that they were Assyrians and arch enemies of the Israelite people. Hearing this commission from God, Jonah decided that the best thing he could really do was run in the opposite direction. The Ninevites, as I say, were enemies and they had a scary reputation, so he hopped on a ship, headed for Tarshish at the very opposite end of the Mediterranean. A case of, yeah, thanks God, but no thanks. And so he got on the ship and they put out to sea, and next thing, a storm is whipped up. There's a great tempest. The ship is tossed around like a rag doll on the sea, and it's in danger of breaking up and of them all being drowned. And to crown it all, Jonah is fast asleep through the whole thing in the hold of a ship. Not a good sleep, not the sleep of the peaceful or the righteous, I think. It's amazing what we can sleepwalk through in life when we don't want to face up to something. And the captain finds him there and demands to know what's going on. Why have you brought this calamity upon us? He says. To which Jonah replies, look, mate, it's a bit of a bad thing. Just chuck me overboard and you'll be fine. And, they were good guys. They didn't want to do that. And so they were reluctant and they reasoned round about it. But in the end, they went ahead and put him over into the sea, and the storm instantly abates. Meanwhile, a huge fish sent by God swallows Jonah, where he spends 3 days in the belly of the whale. It may not have been too bad. One ancient Jewish midrash imagines that the fish's eyes are like great windows, so that Jonah could see all the wonders of the deep. A bit like watching a David Attenborough film on 2 big TV screens. Seating might not have been good, popcorn a bit sparse, but hey. Anyways, Jonah sees the light and he sings a beautiful hymn of praise to God, and then the fish spews him out onto dry land. Unsurprisingly, Jonah is just a little bit more compliant now, and he heads off to Nineveh, where it's fair to say He has astounding success on his prophetic mission with just one single sentence from his mouth: 40 days more and Nineveh shall be overthrown. That was all he said. Well, that's recorded in the story anyway. And upon that, the city repents in sackcloth and ashes. So God changes his mind, spares them, no destruction after all, which frankly pisses Jonah off. And he says, ha ha ha, there you go. Isn't that just what I knew all along, you and your daft merciful ideas? And look, who's your fall guy yet again? So Jonah has a strop. And if the first part of the story isn't ludicrous enough, next, Jonah flees the city, sits down in the blazing heat of the day, no doubt still chuntering on about God and his stupid loving kindness toward one of Israel's greatest enemies, when God provides a nice bush that springs up to shade Jonah from the sun. Jolly good. At last, something to cheer him. But then God sends a worm to attack the bush, and the bush withers and dies. So there he is, beaten by the sun, thoroughly fed up, and mumbling something like, bugger this, let me die now, please. To which God says, is it better to die than to live? Too flaming right, Jonah tells him. And then God says, look, here you are, all screwed up in your head about a plant, which you didn't plant in the first place. You had nothing to do with it growing. It appeared overnight and then it perished. So tell me, if you can get so upset about a plant, why should I not care about Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 people and cattle without number? Why shouldn't I care about them if you care about a bush? And that's where it ends. What a story. And the only book in the Bible which finishes with a question, where basically God says, why can't I change my mind? I mean, it's an excellent theological question for all those who think that God never changes. And, you know, actually in the Hebrew scriptures, he does it over and over again. But what a great thing, a book that ends with God asking a question. So here's my thing. Forget about storms and forget about worms and being swallowed by big fish and all of that stuff. Well, don't forget about them, but see them for what they are, a story. It's a wonderful story, but of course not literal fact. In literary terms, Jonah, the book of Jonah, is a didactic satirical novella, or a short story with a cutting message against religious certainty and ethnic chauvinism. That's how I see it. Basically, Jonah is a man of tunnel vision, a dogmatist, what we now might call a fundamentalist. He despises the Ninevites because they're Gentiles and foreign to the ways of Yahweh. They're the enemy, the others with whom even God should have no truck. Fundamentalism, you know, in whatever sort of form it comes, is basically tribal, parochial, and dismissive of any belief or conviction or point of view contrary to its own. I think it's unworthy of the God of Jonah, let alone the God of Jesus Christ. And I love the way this little book ends up with an antidotal question from the very lips of God. Why shouldn't I care about the Ninevites too? Basically, the story of Jonah lampoons self-assured exclusivism. It's saying, you think God belongs to you, eh? Well, listen to this. And Jonah's first words that are recorded in the book is when he says to the pagan sailors, I am a Hebrew. And he says, I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made both sea and land. And, beneath all these pious words lurks a sentiment that I'm all too familiar with. I'm a Christian. And by the way, you're not. Look, this isn't a Jewish thing. The story appears in the scriptures of the Jews, Christians, and Muslims. But even beyond that, its message speaks to everyone of any creed or tradition or none who imagines that they alone know what the truth is. This is a book about Jonah, about a fundamentalist who thought the others were lost and jolly well should be lost. But much more, I think it's a book about God. The God of all people, not the God of Jews or Christians or Muslims or whoever, the God of the universe who loves all people, all creatures, great and small. But that's not what Jonah wants. He doesn't want a universal God of mercy and grace. He wants a God of revenge against old enemies, a partisan God, a God of punishment, a God who's our God, not theirs. The thing is, religion and theology do not occur in a vacuum. They always have a context. We can't ponder God or ponder theology in a sort of on a blank space, on a blank page. Jonah was written around the 4th century BCE, a couple of hundred years after the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem, when thousands of Jews were driven from their homeland and forcibly relocated in Babylonia. And when people are massacred or forced from their homes, taken into exile, painful memories of this die hard. Just ask the Palestinians who were driven from their homes in 1948, or the Gazans tramping from one pile of misery to the next right now in our world as we speak. But in the end, I think we all have to find ways to move forward together. Or what? I mean, what is the alternative? Which is why the brilliant storyteller of Jonah avoids projecting back to an earlier time with all its pain and hurt. His or her purpose is to promote openness and coexistence of Jews and other communities of the Persian Empire in that period after the return of the exiles. It's a clever book. It's a clever satire on self-righteous religious exclusivism, and a vital reminder that no one, no people, no religion, no tradition owns God. The book of Jonah explores universalism and particularity. Okay, Jonah was a Hebrew, and that was fine, just as I'm a Christian. The next person a Hindu, a Muslim, or whatever. Our particularities, our different stories and traditions, our different convictions are all perfectly legitimate. They're how perhaps we know God, how we make sense of the world. But no tradition monopolizes God. God cannot be reduced to religious tribalism. That, for me, is a really big core message of this beautiful book of Jonah. And look, it's right there in the Bible. Don't you dare imagine that you are right and everyone else is wrong. That's what it seems to say to me. I've got some words from a rabbi called Amy Schwartzman who says this. There's a few of them, so I'm going to put them on the screen for you to see as I read them. She writes this, and this is in her commentary on the book of Jonah, by the way. She says, throughout the entire book, and certainly in the last sentences, God's message to us rings out. I care about all human beings. Those people in Nineveh are my children too. Do we believe, as Jonah did, that God only dwells within our Jewish homes? Do we think that God doesn't weep at the sight of guns being pointed at Palestinian teenagers? I know that God weeps. And I know too that God condemns those Jews who've taken to labeling the entire Palestinian people as terrorists. Only when we realize that both Jews and Palestinians are God's children, sharing the same humanity, and when we accept as well that both are victims and both are deeply wounded, only then can we begin to acknowledge God's command and turn to start our journey to Nineveh. Gosh, I love that. Our Nineveh. Because I think, we all have our Ninevehs, the people who threaten us or hurt us, who bring bad memories for us. We're wounded people in a wounded world, but we have to find our own path to Nineveh, our own way to reconcile with others. And the consequence of not doing that, well, I hope we're not going to see it in the decades that lie ahead. But we need some better leadership, some wiser leadership in our world right now if we're going to find our Ninevehs and, discover a better way forward for all of us. The big message from the book of Jonah, I think, is summed up in the title of a little but very valuable book by J.B. Phillips called Your God is Too Small. I think that's such a prophetic title that can speak to so many different people in so many different situations, including us. As this is the basic problem with all religious exclusivism. It reduces the majestic, mysterious, unbounded presence of divinity that imbues every atom of the universe to some kind of tribal deity. I'm a Christian. She's a Jew. He's a Buddhist. She's a Muslim, or a Hindu, or a Sikh. Maybe they're an atheist. But all of us are stardust. Children of the benevolent, creative spirit at the heart of everything, which I happen to call God, knowing full well what a broken, inadequate label that is to place upon this infinite presence in the universe. Which is why I love the approach of Paul Tillich in his writings, where he's constantly looking for God beyond God, God beyond all of our notions, images, doctrines, and dogma of God, the God who we're always constantly searching for, but never quite find in any ultimate or definitive sense. And it was that inspired me to write this prayer. Beyond God. I can't believe you are bothered what name we give you when we feebly attempt to label the ineffable. I imagine you've got greater things on your divine mind, if mind is something even worth contemplating where you are concerned. Yahweh, Allah, Krishna, Waguru, God, or the far shore, as Buddhists say. What can these words possibly mean? You are the vivacious presence, saturating all things with joy. Landscapes, oceans and wild meadows, statuesque trees, croaking frogs, and a skylark's bubbling aria of delight, sunshine transfigured into sound. May we find contentment in knowing that you are indeed utterly ours, and utterly everyone else's. The breath we share, the longing in our soul for goodness and love, the beauty and wisdom which all traditions aspire to express. You are the ultimate concern of all our best desires and yearning. You are God, beyond God. Amen. Okay, well, I've got to be off to Hove before too long, so I have to just stick with water right now. So if you've got anything to drink, I invite you to take it to hand right now and join me, dear friends, in times of hope but great uncertainty. I invite you to join me in a toast to life, to a big God, the God beyond God. Here's to a God bigger than any or all of us, bigger than Christianity, bigger than any faith tradition, bigger than churches or Bibles or holy sheds, bigger than the Milky Way, bigger than anything that we could possibly imagine. And here's to the life that we share on this tiny planet, hanging in this little corner of our galaxy. Here's to life, L'chaim. Well, thank you guys for joining me today. If you like what I'm doing in the Holy Shed, you can support us. You can buy us a coffee or two. All you need to do is follow the link on the screen. It's also on the posts on YouTube. And we're very, very grateful to all of you who help us to survive in this way and support us and encourage us in lots of ways. So thank you very, very much. Another last reminder, I don't know if it's the last one, but a reminder about the tour dates that I am engaged with. I've just added one actually right at the beginning of November in Southampton. But anyway, can I just highlight for you the one next weekend in Sheffield at Christ Church, Pittsmore. It's a bit different. It's a longer one. It goes from 10:30 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon with some lunch in between. And I'm looking forward to this because it's an opportunity to just unpack things a little bit more, to dig deeper, to engage in more interaction, Q&A times with the folk who are gathered there. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a lovely intimate, interactive day. And I invite you to join me if you're anywhere near Sheffield, or if you know others that you can encourage to be there. That would be great. So that's just about it, really, I think. Thanks for being with me today, and I hope that you have a lovely week this week. Be kind to the world around you. Be kind to people. Be kind, dear friends, to yourself, because you know what? You're worth it. And I'll see you soon. Stay human. Oh, I'm going to leave you actually with a little recording I did. You know, I said at the beginning how I'm sort of still pining for summer. So here's something to just remind you of those days not so long ago. It's one of my prayers called Just Be. And it's just in the fields going down toward Chard Reservoir, where Pat and I have lots of lovely walks. So see you soon, guys. Bye. Maker of beaming buttercups, of all things wild and wonderful, may we learn to stand tall, never apologizing for who we are, but glowing in the beauty and assurance that all we need to do is be.